he died when I was relatively young. I was in my 20s, and he and I started hanging with the wrong crowd, and the wrong crowd being anti-gun liberals. So I started to take on that whole anti-gun mindset. That whole guns are dangerous, we don't need them, and all that. Even though I had a good, fond experience with guns when I was a kid, so I had a bit of a conflict of thought. And what happened was my wife and I had a situation with this guy coming out of a late night movie theater, and I realized in one night that my whole anti-gun position was really wrong and dangerous for myself and my family. It was one of those moments, I don't know if you guys ever had that, you can have one little experience that completely changes the way you think about something, and that was one of those nights. So I told my wife I was getting a gun and brought her through the entire process of gun ownership with me, and helped her understand, helped her feel comfortable with it. But I wrote an article about that night, and it got picked up by a bunch of websites, and that was the first chapter to the book. The rest of the first book just wrote itself. It really wrote itself as I started to research more on how the narrative around guns is manipulated, and how the anti-gun crowd really just tries to implement fear and anger and hate into the conversation to make people scared of guns. So the research went really deep into the thought process of gun ownership and anti-gun, the anti-gun position. And so that's what the book is really about. It's about the strategies and tactics of the anti-gun side of the conversation, what they do to manipulate the conversation, and how we can better understand them so we can either help them or defeat them.
Fantastic. We have got a great guest with us today. John, what do you make of Dan and his book here? We'll get into the other book here in just a few moments.
I'm actually pretty impressed by it because, he's a reasonable guy. He had an incident, and I'm glad nothing ever happened with that. But, you had an incident where it kind of makes you see things in a different view, and it's not so much that there's certain people that just don't get the idea. It's like they're talking about the NRA, blah, blah, this. It's like, well, none of these, hood rats that have guns and are shooting people up like crazy are members of the NRA.
Yes.
When they talk about about other things, it's kind of like, hey, do you realize that these people aren't following the other 2,300 gun ordinances that are already on the books? It doesn't matter what you do. They're not going to follow them. All you're doing is sitting there penalizing and hurting people that are legitimate, law-abiding, good people that, want to have protection.
Right.
It's the biggest thing, and people don't understand that. It's like, you can sit there and you can put speed limits anywhere you want. If you don't have a cop there 24/7 with a speed gun, there's people that are going to speed.
Yeah.
It's just a thing.
Just look at the drivers here in Hutch.
Oh, yeah, they're idiots. But, I like the way you come across in an intelligent, kind of benevolent manner about it. It's like, you were on one side, you went to the other, then you kind of seen the kind of in between, you understand things. And it's like, I like that.
Well, thanks, John. Yeah, and one thing, you've made me, you sparked a thought. There's something about the anti-gun side of the conversation that's really interesting. The people on the anti-gun side, it goes really deeper than just the idea that, guns are actually useful to save lives. It goes deeper than that. There's something going on in the minds of these people. And what I figured out was that it's not just some people like guns and some people don't, which is originally what I thought. But on the anti-gun side, there are two groups. There's the group that I call the anti-gunners, who are regular people that we interact with every day. People we meet in the bank or the grocery store or whatever, even family members that are anti-gun, and they just don't understand, and they're scared to death of guns, and they just don't get it. They would just, rather than learn anything, they would just rather see guns go away. Well, they don't necessarily want to kill our rights,
right?
But they're scared, and they don't know what to do. They don't understand. So they just want guns to go away. But then there's another group that I call the anti-Second Amendment radicals, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they fight every day to disarm their fellow citizens, and not only that, but they fight to convince as many of those anti-gunners as possible to get on board with their mission. I mean, these are the people, the anti-second radicals are the people that will be cheering in the streets if our Second Amendment was ever, repealed. They want a government-controlled society, and they're willing to lie and cheat and do anything they can to convince as many people as possible to go along with them.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever gone to them? It's like people don't understand the Second Amendment was never about hunting and stuff like that. It was about the rights of the people to be able to protect themselves against the tyrannical government in case. The founding fathers knew that, and that's what the Second Amendment is about. And it's like, if you want to sit there and just show somebody, it's like you don't have to per se own a gun, but don't tell people they can't have them. Because I mean, look at the Polish, look at Venezuela, look at everything like that. That's the way you sit there and you get to that system is you disarm your public so they can't fight back.
Well, a perfect example is what we're watching right now in Venezuela.
Right.
It's just unbelievable that we can see what's going on there, and we can have these people over there in Venezuela. These poor people are fighting to defend themselves against a violent government, and the only thing they have to defend themselves with is to throw rocks because they've been disarmed by their government. It's it's the most terrible thing. But we have Democrats in our country who want that for us. It's just unbelievable that they can see what's going on over there and still stick to that anti-gun, government control, socialist, communist, whatever you want to call it.
It's amazing how those same Democrats have armed guards that are with them for protection details.
Well, that too.
But it's like people don't understand. They talk about socialism. Sorry, I'm kind of throwing this off in a different round. But Venezuela used to be one of the most up-and-coming, prosperous countries in the world. It was the most prosperous country in South America at one time, and now look at them.
Yeah.
Well, and it wasn't very long ago that they had rights to firearms. It was only 10 or 12 years ago. And this stuff happens really quick. So, if we don't do something, Democrats will be the death of this country. And because they're playing with something that they don't understand, and I think the Democrat leaders understand, and they want the government control, but the people who vote for them must be really clueless, because they don't understand what's going to happen to their kids and their grandkids and their great grandkids if their policies were to move forward.
Well, they're just myopic. They think it's going to be this great wonderland. It's like they talk about socialized medicine. Socialized medicine is cheaper for the individual per se, but it's crappier medicine. I mean, anybody that's got any kind of money in Canada comes to the U.S. for health care.
Yep.
It's like it doesn't work. I mean, over in France, they decide whether you're going to live or die or whatever. It's like, it's up to the government to decide, not you, whether you can get this life-saving operation. It's like, oh, he's probably going to live another 4 years. Nope, we're not going to do it. And it's like people just don't see the little things. Like there's good things and bad things with everything, but there's not nearly enough good with the ideas of, disarming your public and things, because like I said, the founding fathers put that in place because they wanted people to be protected, because the original government of that was tyrannical Britain, that's how they overthrew them. They were able to arm themselves and be able to protect themselves. And that's how the United States came about. And you've got all these people that just don't seem to understand. They've got a complete different narrative. And the funny thing is, they sit there and say they're the party of, acceptance and, non-exclusivity like that. But they don't judge you unless you don't believe exactly what they think.
Yeah. And another thing that I noticed about the differences between people on the left and people on the right is that the left, the people on the left who vote Democrat and who want these liberal progressive policies, they really they want government control. They want rules and laws and regulations and restrictions. They want that structured, controlled environment because to them it feels safe. They're boundaries that they're safe within. In other words, nothing else is their fault. If they, it's always government's fault or parents or their professor or their their boss or whatever. It comes from a mentality that is a victim mentality with a lack of responsibility, and that's why they gravitate toward that. And what I think on the right, we have a mentality that says, get the hell out of my way, I'll do what I want, when I want, and I don't need you or anybody else to tell me what to think, and if I screw up, I will take responsibility for that screw up, and when I succeed, I expect to be able to reap the rewards from my success. And so that's the difference in mentality. It's completely different, and that's why we have such a divide in this country. And I think the left really wants that government control, but they can't do it because we won't get on board.
Well, I think I agree with totally what you're saying there, and it's like, I mean, I'm a registered libertarian, but I also lean more to conservative. But I think the biggest problem with progressive liberals is they want to tell you what you should believe or what you should accept, and instead of asking you to tolerate or accept it. There's a big difference. If you ask somebody, it's like if I ask Jiggy to accept the fact that I'm a little bit OCD or something like that, he's a little bit more likely. If I tell him he has to, there's a resistance there because most people don't like being told, they like being asked.
Right.
It's a simple thing there. It's like, I mean, you don't have to sit there and accept gay marriage, but you don't care if the couple across the street is a gay couple and stuff like that, because, they're just the guys you invite over for the barbecue, or, the ladies across the street, you sit there, everybody's getting out there having a beer in the driveway.
Right.
You don't care. Just don't shove it down my throat that I have to.
Well, that's just it. That's a great point. That's a perfect example because I don't care what you do. You can date or marry whoever the hell you want.
Right.
I really don't care. But when you bring transgenders or transvestites, or I don't even know what these are, bringing them into schools.
I don't know.
To teach
They've
kids.
changed the terms.
Well, it's like, I mean, I understand that there's people, I truly believe there are people that were born in the wrong body. I really do on that part. But it's the whole thing is, like, if, pardon my, simplifying this, if you have a wiener, you're a guy. If you don't have one, you're not one. Okay, until that happens.
You guys just came off another segment, so we got to be careful here.
I understand, like the thought process, and more power to you to live however you're happy, but until that point, genetically, you're a guy until you get rid of that. And then, then you can sit there and do whatever you want, assign however you want. But I mean, and I know that's oversimplifying and kind of maybe being a little bit too harsh on it, but it's like, if you, it's one of those things where, I mean, I've got friends that are, in the process of transitioning. More power to them. I love them to death, man. They're not going to say anything bad. But it's like, they also understand if they came into like a nightclub I was working at, they're going to have to go to the right restroom.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I agree. This is a tough one because you're right. The good people. It's not that. It's just don't push it on me and tell me that I'm supposed to forget logic and reality and call you something that I know you're not, and force my speech, force my thoughts, force my beliefs, and make me pretend something exists that doesn't really exist. That's where I have a problem with it. You can do whatever you want.
Right.
But just don't force me.
See, that's the whole thing. Most people don't like being forced, anything forced upon them.
Right.
And that's where you get the biggest disconnect between progressive liberals and everybody else. Not all liberals, but the progressive liberals. You go the extreme either way. They're, but it's like, we were talking in your whole thing with the Second Amendment and gun rights and stuff. About a good percentage of the people are law-abiding citizens on it.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. And it's like, it doesn't do any good to make more laws because the people that are already breaking them aren't going to follow them.
Well, yeah.
It's like, sorry, Dan, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I don't know why I drew a blank there for a second.
That's all right.
Do you think the bigger thing would be, instead of like making more laws, actually enforcing and making punishments for violations of those laws a little bit more hardcore? Like, if you're a convicted felon and you get caught with a gun or something like that, you're gone. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You're not going to get released again. It's like, I was telling people, I go, if you make punishments harsher, That's the reason you don't see a lot of repeat offenders like over in foreign countries. Like, and it's going to sound weird coming in here, but in Muslim countries, you don't see a lot of repeat offenders.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
it isn't a candy-ass little punishment. It's like you caught stealing. Okay, well, let's hope you can do things with your left hand, and stuff. It's like if you sit there and say some guy, hey, you thought you were a little Mr. Gangster wannabe like that down in the trailer park there, Roderick, hey, guess what? You're going to spend 50 years in prison, no hope for parole, like that. Oh,
Yeah.
What?
Well, yeah, I agree. I think that that the punishment for a violent felon or whatever the parameter is that says you can't have a gun and you do, that punishment should be great. But what I think that should be the one rule with gun ownership, because all the other stuff is nonsense. All the magazine capacity restrictions and the gun-free zones and all the little restrictions that we gun owners constantly have to jump through hoops to try to not become a felon. Whether it's transportation through interstate travel, whatever. There's a zillion different laws that we have to we're subjected to. All those need to go away, and the one law would be, if you're a convicted felon and you are, caught with a firearm, then that penalty should be great. But that should be the only penalty, because we have states that are constitutional carry states, which means that as long as you're not a felon, you can carry a gun, and those states have the least amount of crime, violent crime, because
It's like the
people
ones
are
that-
there to defend themselves.
Well, you look like the biggest gun violences are in the places that have the strictest, most stringent gun laws.
Of course.
And it's like,
Yeah.
doesn't that sound kind of stupid? It's kind of like...
Yeah, but it does. It sounds really illogical.
It's
but,
an
but when you
oxymoron.
think about why they do it, it makes sense. They understand that. They don't. It's not like they don't get it. They understand what they're doing, and that's part. It seems to be part of the plan. It's really just a government control. It's a control over the people and structuring our society. That what they want to do, and that's the way they do it. They know that the results are terrible.
Well, talk to us about your second book.
Well, the second book, Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative, which is the most important piece. I think the narrative in this country on guns is very important, because once we can change that narrative and help people think differently about guns, help people see guns in an honest, positive light, that's where we need to go. So what the second book, Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, talks about is the media's involvement in this whole conversation and how they shape the landscape of gun ownership, and they shape the narrative, and why they do it. What's their vested interest, and I talk about all that stuff and the strategies that they use. When you watch a lot of these, left-wing media shows, and you have speakers and commentators and things, the strategies and the tactics and the word games that they use are pretty interesting, and they're very good at it.
Yes.
And they're very good at changing the narrative and blocking people into a corner in conversation and stuff. So I talk about all that stuff, mostly the media's involvement.
How do you think that we can change the perception, I guess, media-wise? Because me and John talk about that all the time. About the media always does all sorts of things to screw with.
Well, yeah, they
things here and
sensationalize
there.
stuff and completely... It's like they know if they sit there and they put a certain article out there, it's going to get certain people in an uproar. And then they know another thing's going to get a bunch of other people in an uproar. And it's like they do it on purpose instead of reporting the news. They're like, like a bad, MTV of sorts, It's a bad reality thing. It's like you got, idiots all over the place, like MSNBC, who have no clue what they're talking about 90% of the time. And they just completely do all kinds of a false narrative, and it's like there's always a middle ground on pretty much anything that's out there, but it's just amazing how they manipulate the stupid people.
Yeah, that's just it. They are stupid people. There's stupid people out there who just eat it up like candy. And John, you said false narrative. That's chapter number 2 in the first book. It's called False Narrative. And but yeah, what do we do? Well, we're doing it right now. whether you realize it or not, we're talking about this stuff. And we're talking about guns now in a different way. These types of conversations were never really had. And I saw a spot where people weren't really talking about the kind of the mindset and the psychology behind all this stuff. And we're doing it. We're doing it now. So we have to keep talking about it. And it actually gets very interesting when you get down into the thought process on this stuff, and we have these discussions. And this stuff is happening all over the country right now. There are, maybe for the lack of a better term, right-wing media everywhere. I'm doing shows all over the country, and I can't believe all the people coming out asking to talk about what we're talking about today. So we're doing it. We just got to keep doing it.
Amen, sir.
We've got a great guest with us today. Joins us live here in our broadcast. And so what's been some feedback you've gotten on the book so far? Because both books are incredible.
Well, thank you. The one feedback that keeps coming back is this. People say, you're saying exactly what I'm thinking, but I was unable to express it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm so thankful. I got to tell you guys, I'm really thankful that this is happening like this. I told my editor, I said, when I wrote the first manuscript, I said, look, Bill Dolan, great guy. I said, Bill, this is either going to fall flat on its face, people are going to think I'm crazy, or they're going to absolutely love it. So let's see what happens. And we put it out, and people really do. They're really digging it. So I couldn't be happier.
Fantastic. So how do we get a hold of you online, social media, websites, all these different things?
Well, the book, you can find the book at goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com, or you can search Good Gun Bad Guy on Amazon. I can be found on Facebook and Twitter. My name is Dan Wass, DanWos, as in Sam.